You have asked the question so many times it lives inside you now like background noise. Is this right? Is he right? Is this what it is supposed to feel like? You search the relationship for evidence in both directions, collecting the good things, tallying the concerns, weighing them against each other, and arriving nowhere certain. You ask your friends. You read the articles. You replay conversations looking for the moment you will finally know. And then he does something wonderful and the doubt quiets. And then something unsettles you and the question surfaces again. Is this right? Is he the one? Here is what I want to say to you before anything else. The question itself is the answer, not because wondering is shameful, and not because you are broken for having doubt, but because the specific kind of persistent, chronic wondering you are experiencing about whether he is right for you is itself a piece of information about the relationship. It is not a personality flaw. It is not anxiety that needs to be managed into silence. It is data. And if you are willing to read it honestly, it will tell you more about your relationship than any conversation you have had about it. Because here is the truth that almost nobody says out loud. When a relationship is genuinely right, not perfect, not without difficulty, not without its moments of friction and uncertainty, but genuinely, fundamentally right, the question changes. It does not disappear entirely, but the chronic, low-grade wondering, the constant background hum of is this it, the persistent need to be reassured that what you have is what you were supposed to find, that quiets. Not because you stop thinking, but because the relationship itself provides a quality of evidence that makes the wondering unnecessary. This video is going to tell you what that evidence looks like. It is going to show you the specific difference between the doubt that belongs to a wrong relationship and the uncertainty that naturally belongs to any right one. And by the time we are done, you are going to have a much clearer picture of whether what you have been calling doubt is a normal feature of a good relationship, or whether it is the relationship's most honest communication about itself. The first myth about doubt in relationships is the one that keeps the most women in the wrong situations the longest. It goes like this: doubt is normal and everyone has it, so you should not trust your doubt as a signal. Just commit. Push through the uncertainty. Feelings are not reliable guides. And there is a version of this that is true. Feelings are not always reliable, and early-stage anxiety is sometimes just attachment forming rather than a red flag signaling. But this piece of advice, when applied too broadly, teaches women to dismiss the most honest feedback mechanism available to them. Your doubt is not always wrong. Sometimes it is the clearest thinking part of you, and silencing it because you have been told doubt is universal is how women end up years into relationships that were never right, wondering why they stayed so long. The second myth is the romantic one that sounds like this: real love is supposed to feel uncertain. The butterflies, the not knowing, the intensity of wondering, that is passion. If it felt calm and certain, it would be boring. You want that electric uncertainty. And yes, early attraction carries uncertainty, and that uncertainty has an energy to it that can feel exciting. But there is a profound difference between the uncertainty of new love forming and the chronic wondering of a relationship that has been established long enough to have shown you who it is. The first is about newness. The second is about fit, and confusing them has kept more women in wrong relationships than almost any other belief in the dating culture. The third myth is the most personal and the most damaging. If I feel unsure, it must be my own issues, my attachment style, my fear of intimacy, my tendency to self-sabotage. And sometimes this is genuinely true. Sometimes the doubt belongs to the person doing the wondering rather than the relationship being wondered about. But this explanation has become a way for women to turn every legitimate concern inward, to pathologize their own perception, to interpret their clearest signals as symptoms of their own brokenness, rather than accurate readings of an actual situation. By the time this video is over, you are going to understand how to tell the difference between doubt that belongs to you and doubt that belongs to the relationship. That distinction is going to change what you do next. I want to introduce you to what I call the clarity gap model. The clarity gap is the space between what a relationship is showing you and what you are able to accept about what it is showing you. Every relationship produces evidence about itself through patterns of behavior, through how you feel consistently over time, through what expands in you and what shrinks. The clarity gap is not about the absence of evidence. It is about the distance between the evidence and the story you are still trying to hold on to about what this relationship might become. Here is how it works. When a relationship is genuinely right, when the fit is real, when the investment is mutual, when the foundation is solid, the clarity gap is narrow. The evidence the relationship produces and the feeling you have about the relationship are largely in alignment. You feel secure not because nothing is ever hard, but because the hard things happen inside a container that feels stable. The doubt that arises is situational, about specific decisions, specific moments, specific future questions, rather than fundamental. It is doubt about details inside a relationship whose essential nature you are not questioning. When a relationship is wrong, when the fit is off, when the investment is unequal, when the foundation has cracks that keep reappearing, the clarity gap widens. The evidence the relationship produces and the feeling you are trying to maintain about it begin to diverge. And the wondering that results is not about details inside a stable container. It is a questioning of the container itself. Is this right? Is this what I want? Is this what I deserve? These questions are not anxiety. They are the clarity gap speaking. They are the distance between what you are seeing and what you are still hopping is there. The clarity gap model has 4 specific indicators, 4 distinct ways that the gap reveals itself in the lived experience of a wrong relationship, as compared to the lived experience of a right one. Understanding these 4 indicators is what is going to give you the clear picture that the wondering alone cannot produce. Before I take you through the 4 indicators, I want you to sit with 2 women for a moment, because what I am about to describe will land differently once you have seen it in a specific life. First woman, call her Amara, has been in a relationship for 14 months. By most external measures, it looks solid. He is kind. He has never been cruel. There are good times. And yet Amara has spent a significant portion of those 14 months in a low-grade internal negotiation about whether she is where she is supposed to be. She has read all the same relationship advice. She has done the inner work. She meditates. She journals. She has asked herself every version of the question. And still, quietly, persistently, she wonders. She has told herself it is her fear of vulnerability. She has told herself that no relationship is perfect. But the wondering does not resolve. It just goes quiet for a while and then surfaces again, reliably, particularly when things have been going well, and she pauses long enough to feel what is actually underneath. The second woman, call her Temi, is in a relationship that began quietly and has built into something she did not expect. She has fears about the future, about whether they will navigate the practical differences in their lives. She has moments of uncertainty. But when she sits in the relationship itself, in the actual texture of daily life with this person, something is fundamentally different. The question is not, is this right? The question is, how do we make this work? That shift from questioning the relationship's essential nature to navigating its real-world logistics is the clarity gap closing, and it is the most important shift there is. The difference between Amara's wondering and Temi's uncertainty is not intensity. Temi's concerns are genuinely significant in their own way. The difference is what the wondering is about. Amara is questioning the foundation. Temi is building on it. Let me show you the 4 indicators that will tell you which one you are doing. The first indicator: your peace depends on his behavior in that moment. The first indicator that the clarity gap is wide, that the wondering is about the relationship rather than the future, is that your sense of security inside the relationship is entirely dependent on what he is doing in any given moment. When he is attentive and warm, you feel certain. When he is distracted, distant, or simply less present than usual, the doubt floods back. Your internal sense of this being right is not anchored in anything stable. It rises and falls entirely with his moment-to-moment behavior. And because no person can be consistently attentive every day, the sense of certainty is perpetually precarious. In a right relationship, your foundational sense of security does not track his mood. It is built into the pattern of the relationship itself, into the accumulated evidence of how he has shown up over time, the consistency of his investment, the quality of how the relationship handles difficulty. You can feel temporarily unsettled by a hard conversation or a rough week, but underneath that temporary unsettledness is a baseline that holds. The wondering is not about whether the relationship is real. It is about how to navigate something specific within a relationship whose reality you are not in doubt about. If your peace requires his constant performance of interest to sustain itself, that is not a sign that you need more reassurance. It is a sign that the relationship itself has not provided the kind of sustained, consistent evidence that creates genuine security. And no amount of reassurance in the moment can substitute for that, because reassurance is verbal, and what creates security is behavioral, accumulated over time. The second indicator: you are working harder on the story than on the relationship. The second indicator is about where your energy actually goes. In a relationship where the clarity gap is wide, a significant portion of your emotional energy goes not into the relationship itself, but into the story you are constructing about the relationship, the narrative that explains why it is right, that contextualizes the things that concern you, that maintains the version of the situation that makes staying feel justified. You are not just living in the relationship. You are continuously building the case for it, to yourself, to your friends, to the quiet part of you that keeps filing objections. This is one of the most telling and least discussed signs that something is off, because it is invisible from the outside and easy to mistake for a normal part of being thoughtful about your choices. But there is a difference between the natural reflection that belongs to any serious relationship and the active, continuous work of maintaining a story that the relationship is not producing organically. In a right relationship, you do not need to work hard to explain why it is right. The evidence for it is generating itself through the lived experience of the relationship. You think about it, yes, but from a place of appreciation and navigation, not from a place of continuous justification. The test is simple. When you picture yourself 5 years from now with this person, does the picture feel like something you are looking forward to or something you are trying to convince yourself to want? The first is a relationship whose future is pulling you toward it. The second is a clarity gap at its widest, the distance between what the relationship is and what you wish it were, expressed in a future that you have to work to want. The third indicator: the good times feel like relief, not like home. The third indicator is perhaps the most emotionally honest one, and it requires a particular kind of willingness to sit with the feeling rather than the interpretation. In a relationship where the clarity gap is wide, the good times feel like relief. They feel like a break from the underlying tension, a rest from the low hum of doubt, a confirmation that you had been worrying for nothing. And the relief is real, genuinely pleasurable, genuinely welcome. But relief is not the same as home. Relief is what you feel when a threat temporarily lifts. Home is what you feel when the threat is not present in the first place. In a right relationship, the good times feel like an extension of something that was already there. They feel like the natural expression of a baseline that is stable, not like the exception that temporarily silences a baseline that is anxious. The warmth, the ease, the laughter, these feel like who you actually are with this person, not like what appears when the difficulty pauses. The relationship does not feel like a thing you are managing toward the good moments. It feels like a place you already are, and the good moments are simply the most vivid expression of where you live. This distinction matters enormously because it is easy to mistake high-relief moments for evidence that the relationship is right. Every good date, every tender exchange, every moment of genuine connection gets entered as evidence in the case for the relationship. But if those moments are functioning primarily as relief, as the temporary silencing of an underlying unease rather than the natural expression of a stable foundation, then they are not evidence that the relationship is right. They are evidence that the relationship is capable of good moments inside a container that is not, fundamentally, the right one. The fourth indicator: you cannot fully relax into who you are. The fourth indicator is the deepest one, and it is the one that, once felt clearly, is almost impossible to argue away. In a relationship where the clarity gap is wide, you cannot fully relax into who you are. There is some version of yourself that you hold back, some opinion you soften, some need you minimize, some part of your personality that you have learned, through the accumulated experience of this relationship, to keep smaller than it actually is. Not because he asked you to explicitly, but because the relationship, through its subtle responses to the full version of you, has communicated that the full version requires management. In a right relationship, you expand. Not because there are no boundaries or no accommodations. Every relationship requires some calibration, but because the overall direction of your experience inside it is toward more of yourself, not less. You say the true thing because the true thing is welcome. You take up the space you actually occupy because the relationship has room for it. You bring your full complexity because it is met with interest rather than managed with discomfort. The right relationship does not ask you to be a reduced version of yourself in order for the dynamic to function. It creates the conditions in which the truest version of you is the one that fits most naturally. When you think about the relationship you are in right now, ask yourself honestly, am I more myself in this relationship than I was before it? Is the direction of who I am becoming inside this relationship toward expansion or toward accommodation? Expansion is the signature of a right fit. Accommodation, quiet, ongoing, increasingly effortful accommodation, is the clarity gap made physical in the life of a woman who has been adjusting herself to fit a space that was never quite her shape. So here is where we bring this home. If you have been listening to these four indicators and recognizing yourself, recognizing your relationship in Amara's description rather than Temi's, I want to ask you to resist two equal and opposite impulses. The first impulse is to immediately end the relationship, as if clarity about the clarity gap is the same as a verdict. It is not. What it is information, and information requires thought, not just reaction. The second impulse is to use the complexity of the picture as a reason to do nothing, to continue in the same pattern while telling yourself you need more time to decide. You have had time. What you have not had is honesty, and honesty is what this video is trying to give you the tools for. The first thing you do is stop seeking reassurance and start seeking clarity. Reassurance is the enemy of clarity in this context, because reassurance is designed to make you feel better in the moment, not to produce accurate information about the situation. Every time you seek reassurance from him, from friends, from the good moments, you are choosing temporary comfort over honest assessment. Choose honest assessment instead. Sit with the four indicators. Apply them not to your best memories of the relationship, but to the consistent, everyday texture of living inside it. What does that texture actually feel like? The second thing is to stop pathologizing the question. The wondering is not your attachment style misfiring. The wondering is not evidence that you are too broken to recognize love when it is in front of you. The wondering, persistent and chronic, is the relationship asking to be looked at honestly. Honor it. Ask it what it is trying to tell you instead of trying to quiet it with reasons to stay that you are working too hard to sustain. The third thing, and this is the mindset shift, is to let go of the idea that the right relationship is the one you want most to work. The right relationship is the one that actually works, in the lived, daily, unglamorous sense of that word. Not the one you have invested the most in. Not the one with the most history. Not the one you feel most guilty about leaving. The one where the foundation is solid, where the evidence is clear, where the wondering is about navigating something real rather than questioning something fundamental. That relationship exists. It is not a fantasy, but it requires you to be honest enough about the one you are in now to know whether what you are holding is it or not. And if you sit with all of this and find that your relationship is closer to Temi's than to Amara's, that your doubt is about navigation rather than foundation, then let this video give you permission to trust that, to stop second-guessing something the evidence has already confirmed, to close the clarity gap not by ignoring what you see, but by finally trusting it. If this video gave you language for something you have been carrying quietly for a long time, whether that language brought relief or brought a more difficult clarity, I want you to sit with what you now know. You are not wrong for having wondered. You are not broken for having stayed while the question was unresolved. But you have something now that you did not have before you pressed play. Use it. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second and it genuinely matters. It tells me that this is the kind of honest, in-depth content you need from this channel, and it helps more women who are asking the same quiet questions find their way here. Subscribe if you are not already part of this community, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss what comes next. Every week I make a video specifically for the woman who is done accepting confusion as a permanent state, who wants to understand what is actually happening in her relationships and make decisions that she can stand behind, not just decisions that feel easier in the moment. And before you go, drop a comment below and tell me, which of the 4 indicators spoke to you most directly, your peace depending on his behavior, working harder on the story than the relationship, good times feeling like relief rather than home, or not being able to fully relax into who you are. Be honest. I read every single comment on this channel, and your answer might be the exact thing that someone else watching this right now needs to finally see in themselves.